The notification came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't look at it. I was lying in bed in my studio apartment, still in my scrubs, too tired to even pull the blanket up, 12 hours on my feet, one lunch break I never actually took, and a patient who coded twice before stabilizing. That was my Tuesday. When my phone buzzed on the nightstand, I figured it was my charge nurse reminding me about the Thursday schedule change. I reached over, squinted at the screen. Wire transfer confirmed, closing costs processed successfully. Congratulations on your purchase. I sat up so fast my head spun. I read it again, then a third time, then I pulled up the email, clicked through to the full confirmation, and stared at my name next to the property address until the words blurred. 4 years. 4 years of picking up extra shifts, skipping vacations, eating lunch out of vending machines because I packed my own and left it in the break room fridge to save money. 4 years of saying no to concerts, to weekend trips, to things that normal 29-year-olds did without thinking. And here it was. A 2-bedroom condo on the 3rd floor of a building with a working elevator, a gym I'd actually use, and a parking spot with my unit number painted on the asphalt. Mine. I didn't call anyone, didn't text anyone. I put the phone face down on my chest and lay back, and let the silence do what silence does when something finally goes right. I should explain why I didn't call anyone. My older sister Renee has a gift, not the kind you brag about, the kind that makes you nervous at family dinners. She can take any piece of good news you share and, within 60 seconds, reshape it into something that belongs to her. When I got accepted into the nursing program, she told everyone I'd been struggling in school and finally found something that fit my level. When I got my first promotion to lead nurse on the overnight shift, she mentioned at Thanksgiving that it was because someone quit and they needed to fill the spot fast. She never says anything outright mean. She's surgical about it. Just enough to take the shine off. Just enough to remind the room that my wins are smaller than they appear. And she has 2 kids. My nephew Brody is 9. My niece Cassidy is 6. I love them. That part is true and uncomplicated. But Renee figured out a long time ago that they were useful leverage. Every conversation about my finances eventually circled back to them. You know, Brody's been really struggling in school. Private tutoring is so expensive. Cassidy's been asking about dance lessons, but you know how tight things are, said while looking at me. Always while looking at me. The first time I mentioned saving for a place of my own, she laughed. Not cruelly, just dismissively, the kind of laugh that assumes you haven't thought it through. You're renting a studio for $800 a month, she said. Where exactly is this down payment coming from, Maya? I've been saving. For what, a parking space? She picked up her wine glass. You'd be better off putting that toward Brody's school fund. That's an investment. A condo is just a mortgage you can't escape. Her husband nodded along the way he always did. The rest of the table found something interesting to look at. I smiled, changed the subject, and that night I opened a second savings account that no one knew about. I named it in my banking app simply, Mine. I stopped mentioning the plan after that, not because I gave up, because I understood the rules. You don't announce a mission until after it's complete. So when I pulled into the parking garage of my new building that first Saturday with a carload of boxes, the only person who knew was my coworker Danny, who helped me carry them up, and my building manager Mr. Alvarez, who handed me my fob and said welcome home like he meant it. Danny took one look at the empty living room, spun in a slow circle, and said, Maya, this is real. I said, yeah. And then we ordered pizza and sat on the floor eating it because I didn't have furniture yet, and it was the best meal I'd eaten in 4 years. I want to be clear about the timeline because it matters. I moved in on a Saturday. The following Friday, I had a small housewarming dinner, 7 people total, all coworkers, all people who had listened to me obsess over open house listings during our lunch breaks for the better part of a year. I cooked, we laughed. Someone brought a plant as a gift and said it was low maintenance, which felt like a commentary on my schedule. I put it by the window and felt genuinely happy. The problem started, like most problems in my life, with a photograph. One of my coworkers posted a group photo from that dinner to her Instagram. Nothing dramatic, 8 people crammed around a table too small for all of them, food in the foreground, everyone smiling. She tagged me. I didn't untag myself fast enough because I didn't think I needed to. The account was set to friends only. What I forgot was that Renee and my coworker had been following each other since a family barbecue 2 summers ago where they'd met and exchanged handles. By Sunday morning I had a text from Renee, no preamble. Nice place. When were you going to tell me? I put the phone down and made coffee. I looked out my window at the parking lot below, at my car sitting in my spot, and I thought very carefully about my response. Then I picked the phone back up. I was going to tell everyone soon. Just got settled in. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Brody and Cassidy would love that second bedroom. There it was. Not congratulations, not I'm so happy for you, just an immediate inventory of my space and how it could be redistributed. I didn't respond to that part. I said I'd call later in the week. I didn't call. She texted twice more, both messages variations of, "We should come see it," which I redirected with vague excuses about being unpacking. I was buying time. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I knew how this worked. She would come over, assess every square foot, and begin the slow process of colonizing. First the visit, then the "can the kids play here Saturday while we run errands?" Then the bag that gets left behind. Then the suggestion that it really doesn't make sense for her family to be crammed in their 2-bedroom across town when I have all this space sitting empty. I'd watched her do this to our cousin Terry with Terry's finished basement. Terry still hasn't gotten it back. So I stalled. 2 weeks of vague responses while I settled in, bought furniture, learned which neighbors left passive-aggressive notes about the elevator doors and which ones held them open without being asked. I was building a life. It was quiet, and it was mine, and I was greedy about it in a way I didn't feel guilty about. The first visit happened on a Sunday afternoon in my 4th week. She texted from the parking garage. "We're here, surprise," with a smiley face, which was the most passive-aggressive use of an emoji I'd encountered in recent memory. I thought about not buzzing her up. I thought about it seriously, standing in my kitchen with my thumb over the intercom button. But she was my sister, and the kids were with her, and I could hear Cassidy's voice in the background asking if I had snacks. I buzzed them in. Renee walked through the door with a bottle of wine in one hand, and that expression on her face, the one she uses when she wants to seem generous while she's taking inventory. She handed me the wine, kissed my cheek, and had completed her first 180-degree scan of the entryway before I'd even closed the door. "Oh, this is cute," she said, in the tone people use for things they consider smaller than expected. Brody ran straight to the window. Cassidy found the plant, poked it, asked if it was real. Renee's husband stood by the door with the particular energy of a man who has learned to be very still. She moved through the space the way I move through a trauma bay, assessing, cataloging, calculating. She opened the coat closet without asking. She commented on the kitchen counter space in a way that implied it should be shared. She stood in the doorway of the second bedroom for a long moment without saying anything, which was somehow louder than everything she'd said out loud. "What are you doing with this room?" she finally asked. "It's a home office for now. I work from home sometimes." "You work 12-hour shifts at the hospital. And the charting I do after. And the continuing education. I need a workspace." She turned and smiled at me with the expression that meant this conversation wasn't over, just paused. Cassidy had found my throw blanket on the couch and wrapped herself in it like a burrito. Brody asked if he could use the bathroom. Renee walked to the kitchen, opened my refrigerator without being invited, and said, "You barely have anything in here. I grocery shop on Thursdays. We could bring groceries next time. Make it a standing Sunday thing." Standing Sunday thing. I let that sentence exist in the air between us for exactly 2 seconds before I said, "I'll let you know when my schedule opens up." They stayed for 2 hours. When she left, Renee hugged me and whispered, "It really is a lovely place, Maya." And I couldn't tell if she was being genuine or threatening me. I called Danny that night, told her the whole thing. "Change your locks," Danny said. "She doesn't have a key. Yet." That stuck with me. I didn't change the locks immediately, and I want to explain why, because it's the question I've been asked more than any other. Here's the truth. If I changed the locks or added a keypad the week after her first visit, Renee would know I was suspicious. She would have asked about it, made a scene about it, probably called our mother about it. And none of that would have given me anything useful except an argument. I needed to know what she was actually planning, not just what I suspected, so I watched instead. The next visit 2 weeks later, she came alone. Said she was in the neighborhood, which was a 40-minute drive from where she lived, but I let it go. She brought cookies from the bakery the kids liked, set them on my counter, and we had coffee. It was almost normal. We talked about Brody's school, about our mother's hip replacement coming up, about things that had nothing to do with square footage. I stepped out of the kitchen to get my phone charger from the bedroom. I was gone maybe 90 seconds. When I came back, Renee was standing near the entryway hook where I keep my keys. Her back was to me. She turned around when she heard me, and something shifted in her expression for just a fraction of a second. Too fast for someone who wasn't paying attention. I'd been a nurse long enough to know what it looks like when someone's body says something their face is trying to cancel. "Looking for something?" I asked. "Just admiring that picture," she said, gesturing at the framed photo above the hook. A print I'd bought on Etsy, abstract in blue. "It's new," I said, which it was. She'd seen it the first time too. She smiled. We finished the coffee. She left. I walked to the hook, took my keys and turned them over in my hands. They looked the same. Felt the same. But that expression on her face, that flicker, it lived in the back of my head like a song you can't shake. I called a locksmith the next morning. But here's what I did differently. I didn't swap the lock cylinder. I installed a secondary deadbolt above the existing lock. One that required a separate key, a key I never kept on my main ring, a key that only I had. I told my building manager in case of emergency. That was it. 2 locks now. One she may or may not have copied. One she definitely hadn't. And then I waited. I also placed a call to a coworker's brother, who does home security installation. Within a week, I had 2 discrete cameras inside, one covering the entryway and living room, one in the hallway, and 2 outside covering the front door and the parking garage entrance. Not obvious, not dramatic, just present. Motion activated, recorded to cloud storage, alerts straight to my phone. My sister thought my silence was passive. What she didn't understand is that in 12 years of nursing, I've learned that the most dangerous thing you can do in a crisis is react before you have the full picture. I worked a run of overnight shifts the last week of October. 5 nights in a row, sleeping in the day, working through the night, back home by 7 in the morning. On the 4th night, around 2 a.m., I was restocking supplies in a supply closet when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Emotion alert. Inside camera. Living room. I stepped into the hallway, pulled up the feed, and squinted at the screen in the dim light. The living room was occupied. Not by one person, by several. I could count at least 4 figures from the ceiling angle camera. Music was low but visible. Someone had found the Bluetooth speaker I kept on the shelf and paired a phone to it. Brody was on my couch, feet up, controller in hand, plugged into the TV. Cassidy was asleep on my throw blanket on the floor. Renee's husband was in the kitchen. And there was Renee, sitting at my dining table with a woman I'd never seen before, papers spread between them, both of them leaning in like they were discussing something serious. I lowered the phone, took a breath, and raised it again. Papers, on my dining table, in my condo, in the middle of the night. My hands were completely steady, which surprised me. Years ago, something like this would have sent me spiraling. But something about having evidence in front of you, cold, actual, documented evidence, has a way of burning through panic and replacing it with clarity. I knew exactly what I was looking at. I knew exactly what I had to do, and I knew that whatever came next needed to be handled without emotion, because emotion would give her something to argue with. I didn't call Renee. Didn't text her. Didn't scream into the camera feed. I switched apps, opened the building management emergency line, and left a message explaining that I believed unauthorized individuals were in my unit and I wanted it documented immediately. Then I called the non-emergency police line, reported the situation, gave them my unit number and building address, explained that I was at work and watching via security cameras, and confirmed that no one had my permission to be there. The officer on the line asked if I could identify who had accessed the unit. Yes, I told her, my sister. There was a short pause. Your sister doesn't have a key? She shouldn't. I believe she made a copy without my permission during a previous visit. Another pause. We'll send someone. I went back to work. Hands steady. Charted 2 patients. Answered a question from a new grad who was panicking about an IV line. Acted, as much as possible, like nothing was happening. Because losing composure at 2 a.m. in a hospital hallway wasn't going to help anyone, least of all me. At 3:17 a.m., my phone lit up with 4 motion alerts in quick succession. I pulled up the feed on my break. Blue and red light swept across the living room walls. I could see figures near the door. The angle was partial, but I caught Renee's silhouette, shoulders drawn up, hands moving in that particular way she has when she's trying to explain something complicated in a hurry. Brody had sat up on the couch. Cassidy was awake now, standing with the blanket around her shoulders, confused. The papers that had been on the table were gone. I watched for 4 more minutes without breathing. Then I texted Mr. Alvarez. Police are at my unit. Please document entry records from tonight. I believe the spare fob I reported last week was used. I'd reported a lost spare fob to the building 10 days prior. I hadn't lost it. I had left it on the entryway table during Renee's solo visit, visible, accessible, insurance. He texted back within minutes. Already pulling them. She used your spare fob at 10:44 p.m. 10:44. She'd let herself in with the fob. Brought her family. Spread out in my space like it was a hotel suite she'd booked. When my shift ended at 7, I drove home. I didn't rush. I stopped for coffee, took my usual route, parked in my spot. Rode the elevator up. Stood at my door for a moment, key in hand. Unlocked the top lock, then the bottom one. The condo smelled like the candle she'd lit vanilla, which I actually hate, and she knows I hate. The Bluetooth speaker had been unplugged and placed, too carefully, back on its shelf. The blanket had been folded. The throw pillows were arranged differently than I'd left them, evidence of an attempt to erase evidence. I walked through every room. Made notes in my phone. Photographed the wax strips on my candle holder, the unfamiliar cup in my dish rack that hadn't been there when I left, the slight scuff on the baseboard near the second bedroom door where something had been dragged. Then I made coffee, sat at my dining table, and called my property insurance company to document the incident. My phone showed 7 missed texts from Renee. I read them in order. The first was an explanation they were nearby. The kids were tired. She remembered I was working and thought they could just rest for a few hours. She was going to clean up. This wasn't a big deal. The second escalated slightly. The police were completely unnecessary. She was family. This was going to upset everyone. The third through fifth were variations on call me. The sixth said, "Do you know what you just did to your nephew and niece?" Cassidy cried the whole way home. "She's 6 years old, Maya." The seventh, sent at 6:23 a.m., said only, "Fine." I put the phone down and finished my coffee. The conversation happened 3 days later, in person, at her request. She came alone. I opened the door, let her in, offered nothing, no water, no coffee, no invitation to sit. She sat anyway. "You could have just called me," she started. "You didn't have to involve the police. They scared the kids." "You broke into my home," I said. "I didn't break in. I used the fob." A fob I reported missing, which the building has logged. Along with the timestamp of your entry, I let that sit. And your key to the front lock, the locksmith who installed it confirmed the cylinder was visibly disturbed. You pressed it, Renee. In a soft mold or clay or something. My locksmith's exact words were, "deliberate impression." I have that in writing. Her jaw tightened. "I was trying to help," she said, quieter now. "The kids needed somewhere calm. Our place has been loud with the renovation and I knew you were at work and You used a copied key and a stolen fob to enter my home without permission and host your family inside it. That's not help, that's trespassing. We're not strangers, we're family. Family isn't a password that opens locked doors." I sat across from her, hands folded, voice level. "You sat at that table with papers. What were those papers?" She looked away. "Renee, what were the papers?" A pause. Then, in a voice that was almost inaudible, "Lease applications." I stared at her. "I was going to talk to you about it," she said, rushing now. "We've been thinking the kids need more space, and you have that second room just sitting there, and I thought maybe we could work something out where we pay a little toward the mortgage and we'd be quiet. You'd barely know we were." "Stop." She stopped. "You filled out lease applications for my apartment." "In my apartment, without asking me, while I was at work." The silence lasted a long time. Outside, the elevator dinged. Someone's keys jangled in the hallway. The world went on with its small, indifferent sounds. "I know how that looks," she said finally. "Do you?" "We're drowning, Maya." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I thought it might be real. "The rent went up again. The kids' school isn't great. I'm tired all the time. I looked at what you have and I thought, you thought you could move in." She didn't answer. "You didn't ask," I said. "You didn't even consider asking. You planned it, then came to execute it, and assumed I'd go along because you're my sister and the kids would be there and I wouldn't want to be the person who says no." I looked at her steadily. "I'm that person." She wiped her eyes. "I'm not a criminal. You made an impression of my keys. You took a fob that wasn't yours. You let yourself into a home you don't own and started filling out paperwork to take over a room I use. I don't know what word you want to use for that. What are you going to do? The question came out small. I had thought about this. I'd thought about it during the drive home from my shift, and in the 2 days after, and in the 40 minutes I'd spent on the phone, with a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. I'd thought about it calmly and carefully, the way I think about complicated care plans, because complicated situations deserve clear thinking. The building has a full incident report, I said. The police report is filed. I have camera footage and time-stamped fob logs. What I do with all of that depends on what happens next. She looked up. You won't contact my building management. You won't attempt to enter this building again without a direct, prior invitation from me. Not a text you interpret as an explicit invitation. You won't send anyone on your behalf. And the lease application idea is finished. Permanently. She nodded slowly. If any of that changes, I said, I won't be calling you first. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. When she left, I locked both locks and stood in the quiet for a while. The aftermath was messier than the night itself, which I think is true of most things. Our mother called, which I'd expected. She used the phrase, you know how Renee gets, which she's used my entire life to explain away behavior that would not be excused in anyone else. I told her calmly that I loved her, that I'd see her at her hip replacement pre-op appointment as planned, and that this wasn't something she needed to mediate. She said she'd try. I said I appreciated it. My cousin called to say she heard and she was sorry. My cousin's husband texted me separately to say good for you, which I appreciated more than I expected. A few of our mutual acquaintances went quiet, which is the thing people do when they've decided you've done something uncomfortable but they don't want to say so. I let them be quiet. I've never needed a lot of noise to feel steady. Danny brought me lunch at the hospital the following week and said, I told you to change the locks. I said, I installed a second one. She said, different. I said, better. We ate in the break room and she asked how I was doing, really doing, and I told her the truth. That I was fine, that fine wasn't a deflection, that my condo still smelled faintly of vanilla candle, and I was considering burning sage about it, but mostly I was okay. What Renee had done was a violation. I want to be precise about that. It wasn't dramatic and it wasn't violent, and she'd done it with the particular type of confidence that comes from a lifetime of getting away with small appropriations. My birthday money redirected to school supplies she chose. My weekend plans reshuffled for her convenience. My good news quietly minimized until it was small enough to fit in the shadow of her needs. The condo was just the moment she reached too far. I changed the fob codes. I replaced the front cylinder just to have the satisfaction of it. I bought a new candle cedar and smoke, nothing sweet, and let it burn until the vanilla was fully gone. Some nights I sit at my dining table, the same table where she spread out her lease paperwork, and I eat dinner I cooked in my kitchen with groceries I bought on Thursday like I always do. I work on charts when I need to. I sleep without being woken by someone else's schedule. The plant Danny brought to my housewarming is enormous now, taking over the windowsill like it owns the place, which I find appropriate. Brody texted me once, about 6 weeks after everything. Just a meme he thought I'd find funny. I sent him a laughing emoji back. He's 9. None of this is his fault. I'll find my way back to him and to Cassidy in a form that doesn't require me to hand over my home as the price of admission. Renee hasn't reached out since our conversation. I don't know if that's anger or shame or strategy, probably some blend of all three. I've stopped trying to decode her silences the way I used to. That particular skill took years to unlearn, and I'm not going back to it. What I know is this. I spent 4 years and approximately every spare dollar I had to build something stable and permanent. I made sacrifices that looked invisible from the outside: the dinners I didn't go to, the shoes I bought one pair at a time, the vacation fund I gutted twice to make the down payment work. Every single one of those sacrifices was mine. No one helped make them. So the thing they built is mine too. Not partially mine, not ours in some negotiable family sense. Mine, with both locks and 2 cameras and a building log that says so. I'm not hard. I'm not cold. I'm a person who learned, at 29, that setting a boundary doesn't require an apology. That protecting what you've built isn't selfishness, it's just ownership of the truest kind. You earn something, you keep it. You draw a line, you hold it. Renee thought my silence was compliance. It wasn't. It was preparation.